I'm Don,
I'm LaShelle.
and this is Morrison Madness.
Welcome.
So, this week we wanted to talk to people kind of about where the name Morrison Madness came from. And I know that we've hinted at it in previous episodes. We've talked about how chaotic things have been in our life, and more so my life before I knew LaShelle. Like as a child, even growing up, all of the injuries that would happen to me, and ending up in the hospital, and just all the craziness that went on. But what we really kind of want to focus on is how, even though we try to plan out a week or month or 6 months, that no matter how hard we try and plan that stuff, things happen. Stuff comes up.
Life.
And that's the madness.
Yes.
And so when we got together, me having 3 young kids, adding that into her life, it increased her chaos and madness tenfold.
Exponentially.
Yeah.
Exponentially.
And so she would try and help me. I mean, I had already tried implementing things for myself, like using a day timer or a Franklin planner, using a calendar to try and keep track of when things were due and when events were coming up and stuff like that.
Right.
And when we met, she suggested, trying these other things. And as time went on, we tried more and more different things to accomplish stuff. I remember at one point we had a set of timers that sat on the desk in the dining room, right next to the refrigerator, for the kids. And the kids had to do so much of something, like 30 minutes of reading before they could have 30 minutes of video game time. And then they had to do 30 minutes of something else before they could have, another 30 minutes of TV time or whatever it was. And, and not that was super expensive, but it wasn't cheap. I mean, I feel like it cost $50.
Right.
It lasted maybe all of a month, and then it was impossible to get the kids to stay focused on using it.
Right.
They would forget to start it, even though we knew they were reading. They would forget to start it, whether it was accidental or intentional.
Right.
And then my time's up. We couldn't say whether their time was up or not.
Right.
And it's one of those things that while it seemed like a good idea, it was a very hard concept, because while they're doing that and supposed to be being able to do it unsupervised, the larger problem at our house is they were only here every other week. So whatever systems were in place at their other parents' house, we didn't have any control of.
Right.
And then at the time when they're supposed to be doing this, one of us is making dinner, one of us is working on stuff. When you went back to school, you were trying to study.
Right.
There was laundry to be done, all of those kinds of things. And so when as the kids got older and then they started having events, we tried to get each one of them to use a Google Calendar.
Right.
Fought tooth and nail.
Yep.
At this point, I don't think any of them use a Google Calendar still.
Dolan does. I don't know if that he uses a Google Calendar. He uses the calendar that's in his phone. Whether he syncs that to Google, I'm not sure. And if he does, he doesn't sync it to the Google Calendar that we set up their Google accounts. Like I set up Google accounts for them because you didn't have Google when we first met, and so
no, right.
I made you and you were mad at me. I made you get a Google account and the Google Calendar and stuff.
Well, and I still prefer Outlook. I don't know why.
No, right.
I mean, I use Google, but
right.
I just
and I get that.
I like the integration with Office and all of that other stuff, and having used that when I worked for the university and for the VA, it's what I was used to.
Right, and at the time, for the general public, Outlook wasn't something that was open to the public necessarily, and then you couldn't get more than one calendar. You couldn't share your calendar with other people, where with Google, you can share your calendars between 100 different people.
Well, and the other issue was that getting an Outlook or a Windows phone
Right.
It was, even back then, was extremely difficult.
Yes.
And then now they're non-existent.
Right.
So.
Right. Because again, when I'm at the university, I use Outlook. I use the calendar with that, but then it's in its own system, and I can share certain things with certain people within the company, but not general public, not between spouses kind of thing. And so the Google was just a little easier to do that. But when we first met, you still had the monthly calendar on your desk kind of idea, and you would try and keep track of all of the different things that needed to happen.
Well, but I also had them in my day planner.
Right, and then in your day planner. But then a lot of times your calendar would get covered up with other stuff, papers, mail, what have you, and then you would miss things on your monthly calendar. And so I was like, you need to be putting that stuff into the Google Calendar, and then look, you can actually set it up as a recurring, so it happens every year, so you're not having to remember what month it is that it comes or whatever else that way.
I have had the same day planner, though.
Yes.
For over 25 years.
Yes.
I have never lost it. I used it religiously until we found an electronic way of things to use that worked. I mean, we went through a bunch that we tried did. We even tried a digital version of
the
day planner and Franklin Covey's whatever thing, and they just weren't the same digitally as they were on paper.
Right. But going back to the kids, so then when we were setting that up, I set up a Google Gmail account for each of the kids. They didn't really have access to it, but we set it up so then that way we had a calendar for each of the kids. So as they had school events or doctor's appointments or something along those lines, we could see which kid had what, and then we could invite whether it was both of us that needed to attend or just you because they were taking it to the doctor or something along those lines. So then that's why the kids each had a Google account. And so I believe Dolan uses a calendar. I just don't know that it's a Google Calendar, but he does use that in his phone, because whenever I've been around and I've asked him, like, hey, when do you work? He can pull out his phone and he looks. So he's got something in his phone that he's looking at. I'm assuming it's a calendar. Maybe it's just a picture of the list. I don't know, but...
Yeah, I don't know either.
My understanding was that he did use a calendar in some form. So, but yes, none of them wanted to use the calendar. It restricted them too much, I think, was the terms that they would use. So.
Which is weird to me. I also, part of it was they felt like then that it was almost like an invasion of privacy because we knew everything that they were doing.
There was a big push.
We couldn't get it through them that we don't want to plan things for you when you have other stuff planned. So if you put something in the calendar, then we're not planning on you being available to do any other things.
Right.
They couldn't get that through their head.
Right. But there was a big push, I
think. I realize that teenagers all go through that.
Yes, but there was a big push at the school of protect your privacy. Don't let anybody know your account information, all that. Which made sense when it came between friends, but they pushed it to the point where the kids thought that they weren't supposed to share any information with the parents, which is not necessarily the way that's supposed to happen, because then the kids were setting up, online media accounts that we didn't even know that they had, and so we weren't able to stay on top of that, unfortunately, because they'd set them up at school. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic, but back to the schedule stuff. So yes, we had a lot of different systems. We tried a lot of different components. We even had, like, the kids each had a night that it was their job to decide what we were having for food, and then they were supposed to help cook or be in charge of cooking that night if it was an easy enough recipe that they could make on their own. And then we could help out if needed and stuff that way. And so they learn skills that way to survive later on.
So, just as an example, and I won't go into all the detail of everything that we have scheduled for last week, but as part of last week, we have our days broken up into, I know that there are certain days of the week that LaShelle is going to be studying, working on her stuff for her dissertation, and then there's a day when she has meetings for her GA position, and then, there's a day, sometimes 2 days out of the week where she's free to help me do stuff. Right. And then she knows which days I have appointments or which days I have meetings, and then, we have it set up in the calendar where in the mornings I'm working on stuff for our DJ business, and then in the afternoons I'm working on stuff for my gaming store business. And then, like just this last week, for example, a brand new set came out for Magic the Gathering. So she knows, because I have it in the calendar, that when that set comes in, really the next 3 or 4 days, I'm not available for hardly anything else.
Right, that's
because
all we do.
I'm going to be opening those sets, organizing them, sorting them, alphabetizing them, and then getting them inventoried and put into inventory to sell. Because usually a store gets their allotment of cards 2 to 4 days before the release. So you can start pre-selling them a little bit, but you've got to start shipping them out within 72 hours of the release. And they release at midnight
Friday morning.
You know, so unfortunately most of the time I don't get mine. Sometimes I'm lucky enough to get mine on Wednesday. Usually I don't get them until Thursday morning.
Right.
So I don't have a whole lot of time to be getting them cracked and opened.
Yeah, there's a quick turnaround.
Right, before other stores are selling them. Some stores get theirs as early as the Friday before or on Monday, you know. So
right.
Knowing that that's happening, if she didn't know that was happening and we had a bunch of other stuff planned, then all of a sudden I come home and I'm like, yeah, so this is all I'm going to be doing for the next 3 days.
Right.
It would be chaos.
Right.
So even in dealing with all of that, knowing that that's what our schedule was set up to be, we had, I think, 3 meetings come up this week that were out of the blue.
Yep.
So because they involved our DJ business, those take a priority. So we had to take set time aside for those.
Yep.
So then that slowed down getting cards inventoried. But then, you know, that leads to new business.
Right.
And
which then, in the long run, even though we've planned out, this is kind of our general plan, our schedule for the next several weeks or what have you, you know, then that changes because now one of those meetings was, hey, we want to hire you to do a weekly gig on this night. Well, that was one of the days that we had set aside to do something. So now we have a gig during that time. We're losing that time to be able to do the topic that we had set up. So
right.
We have to rearrange our whole schedule to try and figure out how to fit it in.
And before the pandemic,
right.
you know, we were doing 5 to 8 shows a week.
Right.
And so being right now during this particular time as of the first of the year,
right.
We were down to 3 shows a week. We had been up to 4 shows a week, once in a while 5, because there's a place that we do once a month.
Right.
But then...
And then we had quite a few weddings.
Right, because stuff came up with Omicron. I'm just talking about regular gigs, though.
Right.
You know, one of the places said, oh, we're not comfortable bringing people back in. And so we were down to 3 consistent gigs a week. And so because of that, I had been looking at, you know, I probably need to take a job.
Right.
Doing something, whether it's going back to working at a hotel or going back to doing construction or whatever the job might be. I needed something at least part-time, if not full-time,
right.
You know, to make sure that we're covering our bills and expenses, because just because the country shut down doesn't mean your bills and expenses go away.
For your company, right, exactly.
And so we had really started discussing that at the beginning of February, and I really started looking for jobs and had found a couple that I was just getting ready to apply for, when now all of a sudden we've had 2 businesses say, hey, we'd be interested in having you do music bingo or name that tune or trivia every week at our location. You know, we've heard from some people that you guys put on a really entertaining show. And so there's, you know, having that generates enough income to cover our expenses to where I don't need to be out looking for another job.
Right. Yeah. So then that changes how we were planning on moving forward. And then also changes, again, like our weekly setup as far as what days, what times we normally would do things. Because now those times that we would normally do stuff, we may have a gig during that time.
Right. And some of it's as simple as, oh, now I've got to do laundry in the morning when I'm trying to work on my DJ stuff. Or, you know, I've got to do this in the afternoons when I'm supposed to be working on stuff for the gaming store. But it also affects, you know, how we eat, because some of the places that we work, as part of our payment, we get a free meal, but then we still have to have meals for lunches. So I don't want to have Well, I could eat ham sandwiches every day for lunch, but you couldn't.
No,
so,
I don't want ham sandwiches
we're trying to figure out when we can have meals that then can be reheated for lunch. So it completely, it isn't just, one or two little thing that it changes. It completely, and not that we're complaining about more business. No. I certainly don't want people to think that.
No.
We're just trying to explain that by having this system in place, it creates less chaos for us. Because we can sit down and look at, okay, this is what we had planned. Now these things are going to be a permanent thing in the schedule. How do we rearrange our planning on a week-to-week basis? And then how does this affect our 3-month outlook, our 6-month outlook, and all of those kinds of things?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and we try every week to sit down and plan out the next week or week to 2 weeks. Sometimes I'll say we need to look at the next 2 weeks because I know something big is coming up, and so I want to kind of schedule extra stuff to make sure that everything's covered. But a lot of times it's just about a week that we schedule out. And during that, we look at what's already scheduled, what needs to get done. So we also kind of look at our to-do list, our task list kind of idea. And then we also look at meals, and we plan out our meals for the week. And we're going to do a podcast, I think, about actually scheduling that out at some time and kind of doing maybe a mock one. I don't know if we'll do an actual one of our schedules ourselves, but maybe something similar to that. So you can kind of see how we actually do that. And so that's by doing that part every week, we're able to kind of adjust when things come up, but we still have to look farther out consistently as well because of the way our company runs. We have weddings that are booked into the next 2023.
Right.
So we know that, sometimes we already know that a year and a half from now or 2 years from now, we're not going to be able to go on a vacation in March or April or whatever because we have weddings during that time. We realize that up front. And so that's something that sometimes we have to plan different things around that kind of stuff.
Right.
And that's something that I'm not sure everybody knows or realizes about this type of business. When you're a service industry that is based off of individual events like this, it's different. You're not able to just say, oh, well, in June I'm going to take 2 weeks off. That's not how this works because you don't know if you're going to have an event in June sometimes a year or 2 years in advance, and sometimes you don't know until 2 weeks before or a week before. We've had, especially even with the pandemic, we've had where people have called us on Thursday saying, hey, my DJ got sick and my wedding's tomorrow. Can you DJ for us?
Right.
So it totally throws everything. Yeah, it totally throws everything out as far as what we had planned for that day then, because we realized that, yes, somebody needs a DJ. And it's a very important day when it's a wedding day. And so we want to be able to be as helpful as we can, but it's also income for us. And so it's a good thing for us to be able to step in and be able to do that. So we figured out ways to make sure that we are able to be flexible at a moment's notice, but yet also get all of the different things done. And when you have Star Entertainment and Dragon Magic Game and just other life stuff, the house here, our other house that we've dealt with the fire and all of that kind of stuff. And then I'm working on my PhD. I'm also a sign language interpreter,
Right, or if things are slow for those other businesses, me taking a part-time job.
Right.
Right. We have to keep that stuff organized.
Right. And so all of that comes into play and you're constantly juggling, and that's part of the way that this works.
So as part of our future episodes, we're going to break down for you how we use programs like Google Calendar, and how we integrate that into our businesses and our regular life.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about programs that we've tried that we didn't care for whatever reason, programs that we did try that we like, that we are currently using.
Yep.
We may even mention other programs that are out there that we looked at but opted not to try for whatever reason.
Right.
Really just to try and help people, because I'm sure we're not the only family that has
20 schedules
going on. The madness,
Oh yeah, no, I think madness is in line with family. Like that, anytime you have more than 2 people involved in stuff.
I don't know that you even have to have 2 people. Crazy. I think a single person that's really trying to be a hustler, if they're working
absolutely.
a full-time job
and
they've got a couple of side gigs, you could be out there with a full-time job, plus you're going to school, plus you're doing ride share, or you're doing some delivery service, or whatever else to try and make money, or all the you want to be a dog walker to try and make extra money. being able to organize all of that stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
In the best way possible so that you can manage it.
Right.
Everybody has a dream, and that's part of it. Being able to organize this helps us aim for what our future goals are, whether it's a year goal or a 5-year goal or a retirement goal,
right,
or whatever. Everybody's got that goal or that dream, and if you can't manage your madness trying to get to that goal or that dream,
right,
it's an insurmountable battle.
Right. Yes. And that's stuff that we, through trial and error, have learned a lot about and do fairly well with. I wouldn't say that, we're perfect. I don't know that anybody could be perfect because life isn't perfect. But we're good at being able to organize and manage and get things done. And so that's something that we want to be able to share with you guys and hopefully help some people out.
Absolutely.
So, should we wrap that up for today?
I think so, yeah. If people have any questions about any of this kind of stuff, please leave comments for us, and we're happy to, even if it's a suggestion of a program that you might use, or if you have questions about anything that we talked about. Again, we're going to get into more of it into more detail later on.
Absolutely.
But, please let us know. We love trying to answer people's questions about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the more we get into it, I feel like the more questions that people may have. So, and there might be a lot of people that have the same question as you, but just weren't brave enough to put it forth. So if you have a question, please feel free to throw it out there.
Yeah. There's no silly questions at all.
I don't think so. Not when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Right. Absolutely. Everybody has their own way of doing stuff. And, there's always going to be other programs that are out there. Like, we're both more Windows and Android users. We know very little about Apple products. And so if you have, ideas about Apple products that work that way or that are really good, toss them out there for other people too, because maybe they're an Apple person and we're not covering that. So as we're going along, but yeah, we're always any kind of question is not a silly question, because if you're wondering, then it wasn't clear and we want to clarify that.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
We're good to go.
Thanks for joining us for this episode.
Thanks. Take care.